Think about Europe at the start of the 20th century. It felt like it was on top of the world, right? The center of everything, industry, culture, you name it. But then, in just a few short years, it completely imploded, diving headfirst into one of the worst wars humanity has ever seen. The big question is, how on earth did it all go so wrong?
And that's exactly what we're going to unpack. How did a single spark, just one assassination, manage to ignite a full-blown world war? See, it wasn't just about that one event. The assassination was really just the match. The whole of Europe, well, it was a powder keg, just sitting there, waiting for something to set it off. So what made it so incredibly volatile?
Okay, so let's set the scene. On the surface, pre-war Europe looked shiny and powerful. But underneath all that, man, it was a total pressure cooker. You had all these giant competing empires rubbing up against each other. The Industrial Revolution had basically put them all on steroids, making them bigger and stronger, but it also made them hungrier. Suddenly, everyone was fighting for the same stuff: resources, new markets, and of course, bragging rights.
And this right here, this really gets to the heart of the problem. You've got all these conflicting ambitions. Think of it like this. Britain is the old champion, trying to defend its title, its massive global empire. But then you've got this new challenger, Germany, who's getting stronger and wants its own place in the sun. Meanwhile, France is over in the corner, still fuming about a big loss to Germany years ago and just itching for a rematch. And then you have these two older empires, Russia and Austria-Hungary, who are both looking at the Balkans and thinking, I need that to stay relevant. The thing is, none of these goals could exist at the same time. Something had to give.
So with all this rivalry, what's the first thing everyone does? They start building weapons. A lot of weapons. This wasn't just your standard arms buildup. It was a frantic, paranoid race to have the biggest, baddest military machine on the block. It created this really toxic mindset, you know? The logic was simple. Hey, my neighbor is building a new cannon. I'd better build two, just in case. Of course, that just makes them want to build three. It's a vicious cycle. After a while, war starts to feel like it's not just a possibility, it's the inevitable next step. And a perfect example of this is the Dreadnought. I mean, what a name, right? When the British launched this thing, it was a total game changer. It basically made every other battleship on the planet obsolete, like overnight. It was bigger, faster, and had way more firepower. So what happens? Germany sees this and says, we need those too. And boom, you have a full-blown naval arms race. It became about more than just security, it was about national pride. Counting who had more of these floating steel monsters became a national obsession, a way to prove who was top dog. And this race wasn't just happening on the water. Oh no. On land, countries were using mass conscription to build these enormous armies, millions of men strong. At the same time, technology was creating weapons of frankly terrifying power. We're talking machine guns that could wipe out hundreds of soldiers in seconds, cannons that could rain down destruction from miles away. You have to understand, Europe wasn't just preparing for a war. It was methodically building a gigantic machine designed for one purpose: mass slaughter.
All right, let's look at the next big factor in all this: the scramble for colonies. Back then, having a big empire was the ultimate status symbol. It was like collecting countries. So you had this global free-for-all, this massive land grab for territory, resources, and influence. The problem was, all this competition created friction points all over the globe, and tensions that started thousands of miles away had a nasty habit of boomeranging right back to Europe.
The Moroccan crises are a textbook example of this. So France is trying to lock down its control over Morocco. Germany, who's kind of feeling left out of the whole empire-building party, decides to stir things up. They deliberately start a crisis, basically to see if they can break up the friendship between Britain and France. Now, they managed to avoid an all-out war, but the damage was done. It completely poisoned the well, made everyone even more suspicious, and basically shoved all these countries deeper into their own hostile camps.
Now, bubbling under the surface of all this, the arms race, the colonial rivalries, was this really intense wave of nationalism. And we're not talking about just being proud of your country. This was something different. It was aggressive. It was this toxic idea that my country is better than your country, and a real contempt for everyone else. It became this powerful cultural force that made people see war not as a terrible last resort, but as some kind of noble adventure, a chance for glory.
I mean, just look at France. For 40 years, the entire country held a grudge, a big one. This idea of revanchism, getting revenge on Germany for taking their territory of Alsace-Lorraine, was everywhere. It wasn't some fringe political thing. Kids were taught about it in school. It became part of what it meant to be French. And when an entire nation is built around the idea of getting even, well, that makes a lasting peace pretty much impossible, doesn't it?
And over in Eastern Europe, you had another flavor of this. Russia was pushing this idea called Pan-Slavism. Basically, they positioned themselves as the big brother and protector of all Slavic people. The catch? A whole lot of those Slavic people lived inside the borders of their main rival, Austria-Hungary. So this idea was a direct threat to Austria-Hungary's existence. It could literally tear their empire apart from the inside. And that's what made the Balkans the famous powder keg of Europe.
Okay, so this brings us to the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. The thing that acted like glue, holding all these other dangerous elements together. A tangled web of military alliances. Now, on paper, these treaties were supposed to keep the peace, right? The idea was to create a balance of power, to scare anyone from starting a fight. But what they actually created was a continent-wide tripwire. One little stumble, and everyone goes down.
And this system wasn't built in a day. It started way back in 1882. Germany, worried about being stuck between France and Russia, created the Triple Alliance with Austria-Hungary and Italy. So what did the other side do? Naturally, they got nervous and formed their own club. France, Russia, and Britain slowly but surely teamed up in what became the Triple Entente. By 1907, the lines were drawn. Europe was officially split right down the middle.
So here's the bottom line. By 1914, you've got two teams, two heavily armed camps staring each other down. And this whole setup was a trap. It meant that a fight between any two countries wouldn't stay between those two countries. An attack on one was an attack on all their friends. There were no referees left on the sidelines because every major player had already put on a jersey and picked a team.
And now you can really see how all the pieces fit together, right? The rivalries and the fight for colonies, that was the fuel. The insane arms race and the aggressive nationalism, that was the kindling and the spark. And the alliance system, that was like a trail of gasoline connecting everything, guaranteeing that one little fire in the Balkans would instantly erupt into a continent-wide inferno. It was, quite literally, a perfect storm.
Which leaves us with a really big question, one that's still relevant today. All of these alliances were created in the name of defense, of keeping everyone safe. But in the end, they acted like chains, dragging everyone down together into the abyss. It really makes you think. When you tie nations together with promises of war, are you preventing a fight? Or are you just guaranteeing that when it comes, it'll be bigger than ever?